All right, welcome guys.
Good to see you, Lukas. And thanks for your contribution. We'll just wait 5 minutes for people to jump in. And looking forward to today. Hi, Cinziana. Glad you found the link.
Hi. Glad to
Good
be
to see you.
super.
All good.
Invitation.
Good to see you. I'm with Dimitri and Joris here at the Multiversity. They're just logging on. And yeah, this is we have to take the Multiversity very seriously. This is well, and it you know what, to be honest, the first 30 minutes is just opening, and I'm gonna give some details on the release of the anthology and stuff before everything unfolds. But so this is just very quickly, we'll just go through. This is the page for the launch event, and on the page, this is really what I want to show you. On the page, this is the cover, and the cover is courtesy of a good friend of mine, Alicia Herbert. We had some brainstorming sessions for this cover. And I want to just sort of describe the theoretical background, like what are you looking at here? So, of course, the writing for a first cause side is the front cover. So if you pick up a physical copy, you'll this will be the front of cover. This is the spine, and then the man coming out of the hole here and looking at the empty chair is the back cover. And for those of you who, hopefully this worked, but what you're looking at on the front cover is literally the image of the inside of a Klein bottle. This is supposed to be the inside of a Klein bottle. And so these characters are looking up at the snout or the entrance exit of the Klein bottle. And you see the entrance exit of the Klein bottle, there's where the object petit is. So it's the A is situated at this entrance exit. And then when you turn to the back cover, you see a guy who's climbed up the Klein bottle, and he's at the entrance exit, and what he finds is the empty analyst chair. And the empty
Brilliant.
analyst, yeah, I think I love the concept of it. And so the empty analyst chair is, of course, the lack in the other.
Exactly.
Right? And the lack in the other, and the fact there is no big other, and the fact that the analytic process is itself mediated by you thinking that the analyst is a full, complete subject. So that's the point of the cover and the art, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I'll do some more social media announcements and stuff like that when the physical copy is available to purchase. But that's kind of the conceptual background between what's going on here, and you can see all of the authors. If I've made a mistake with any of your author summaries, or if there's a link that you want me to put, please just let me know. You got Dimitri, Daniel Garner, Edie Hitchcock, David Pasty, Łukasz Silski, Philip Shin, Matthew Stanley, Thomas Hamelrick, Cinziana Ravini, Cleo Kearns, Samuel McCormick, Joris de Kelver, and Mark Gerard Murphy. And this author list is just in the order of our events for today. So this is the page. Now, on the actual Philosophy Portal website, if you go to anthologies, you can see the 4 anthologies now: Enter the Alien, Abyssal Arrows, Logic for the Global Brain, and Writing for a First Cause. And when you click Writing for a First Cause, here's the official page. You've got the cover. This will take you to an Amazon link. This will take you to the course, the conference. I've got to get a free preview up. But really what I want to show you before going into the details of what this anthology is, and I really want to say, for all the authors who are here, this is really, I don't want to rank the anthologies in terms of best and worst, but this is a really high quality anthology. I really can say that with confidence and pride in the quality of the work that was submitted. The editing process was pretty smooth. There wasn't any major there weren't any papers that needed a significant amount of editing, and the quality of the thinking and the writing was very high. And if you click on this button, the student and member access, like if you don't want to pick up a physical copy or a Kindle copy, of course you don't have to. But if you click the student member access button, where it will take you to is this page. And this page is the publications page for every single, and so this is password protected, but all the authors and everyone who's coming here, I don't mind if you can have access. The password when you click on this button, student member access, is all one word, all lowercase. And what it will do is it'll take you to this page called publications, where you'll see the publications for all 4 anthologies. And when you scroll down, all of the authors in our anthologies are listed by alphabetically. So let's take, for example, Cinziana Ravini. You click see Ravini, Cinziana, and there's our paper, The Cruelty of Love. And it's got the citation with the page numbers or whatever. You click PDF. When you click PDF, you got the paper, right? So you have virtual access to all the papers in the Cree anthology, as well as you can see the history of our writing as a whole. Or for example, Wukas Silsky got drive rest withdrawal through sublimation, PDF, and there you go. So everything's there. I was able to divide up the PDF and have everything there. And you can, of course, all these authors are the history of the whole work, basically. So what I want to do in between now and 2:30 my time, which is about the next 20 minutes, is just give you an overview conceptually of what you're going to be expecting to read when you go into this anthology. The contents, what are the major themes that come out? And then at 14:30, I'll give a short overview of what I was trying to offer. And throughout the day, I just want to emphasize that the question that I've been asking myself when thinking about what I want to say throughout my session today is, basically just as simple as when you were writing your article for the anthology, 5 or 10 minutes, when you were writing your entry for the anthology, what was on your mind? What did you want to communicate? And we discuss. We just reflect together. And I think that the reason why, of course, at Philosophy Portal, we've done courses, conferences, anthologies. This is the first time we're doing an anthology book launch. And the reason why we're doing an anthology book launch is because I'd love to create more of a sense that this is a community work. And I'd love to create more of a sense of an engagement with the authors themselves, so that you can hear from the authors themselves what they were thinking about when they were writing their article and when they were contributing to this anthology. So that if you do pick up a copy and you do read it, then you have kind of like an actual personal connection to the authors that contributed to the work, and maybe some new connections will emerge from this event. All right, so I'll stop sharing my screen there, and I just want to take you through, first, I'll take you through the anthology history as a whole. That this really, and what I want to do with this history is show that we really do live in the age of immediacy today. I interviewed a cultural theorist, Anna Kornblue, who wrote a book titled The Style of Immediacy, The Style of Too Late Capitalism. And what she's trying to get at in that book is that we are drowning in immediacy and we've lost the capacity for mediation. And Philosophy Portal's really been trying to, let's say, swim upstream in a current of immediacy towards the capacity for mediation and whoever wants to come along for the ride. But this whole process really started in the, say, summer of 2023. So it's we're in the summer of 2025. So we're looking at a 2-year process here of where we did a course on Alenka Zupancic, What is Sex? And I want to shout out Alenka and What is Sex book, because not only is this anthology a testament to a deep mediation on Lacanzi Cree, but it's also many themes of Alenka's work comes up in this anthology. I want to shout out Philip Shin. Philip Shin, he wrote a piece in this anthology, which is largely inspired by what is sex, and themes of what is sex you'll see them come up throughout the anthology. So I want to also think this is not only just a Lacanzi Cree anthology, it's also inspired by, of course, the Slovenian school. Alenka's work is important there. And I think what I want to state as a starting point for that, why is that important, is because I think the Slovenian school, it's operating at the intersection of psychoanalysis, deep clinical work, but it's also operating at the intersection of philosophy, deep conceptual, reflective work as well. And they bring them together. And they're trying to avoid a clinic that is cut from the world and the world which is cut from the clinic. And we want to bring, and I think what this anthology does, it brings these two threads together. And this is also a testament to the influence of the special guests that we had in the Acree course, Todd McGowan, Peter Rollins, Richard Boothby, and Isabel Millar. All four of those figures are analytically inspired, but they're not necessarily in the clinic, right? They're analytically inspired, and they're showing the way in which clinical work and analytic work has application. For example, in cultural theory, Todd McGowan's work; in theology, Peter Rollins' work; in philosophy, Richard Boothby's work; and I suppose also Isabel Millar's work, located in philosophy. The title, Writing for a First Cause, and of course inspiring the image of the anthology, which I showed at the opening, is basically, I got that idea for the title when I was reading the final chapters of Lacan's Cree, where it seemed to me Lacan was developing psychoanalysis in relationship to the other fields of knowledge. For example, and he does this in relationship to Aristotle's quadrant of causation: final cause, material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, where he seems to link science to formal cause, dialectics to material cause, religion to final cause, and magic to the efficient cause. And what he wants to show, I think, at the end of the Acree, is that psychoanalysis is the science of the first cause, and that psychoanalysis changes the way we think about metaphysics, and it changes the way we think about the history of Western knowledge. I want to say so far as the history of Western metaphysics ignores the subject. It ignores the first cause. The history of Western metaphysics has an idea of the final cause, material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, but not a good idea of the first cause. And this ignorance of the subject is, I think, thinking about the absolute as substance without subject. And philosophy portals foundations, of course, from Hegel, is something like the absolute is substance, but also subject. So what I think we see in this anthology, and which I think is attested to in the articles which you all produced for this, is subject as first cause is something like the lack in substance, like the lack in what Western knowledge, the history of metaphysics, has conventionally understood as the matrix of causation. And I even want to go so far as to say that, and inspired by the cover as well, that the matrix of causation is something like, and I think Lacan himself points towards this towards the end of the Acree, that the matrix of causation is something like Plato's cave. And I want to represent Plato's cave as this climb bottle with an entrance and an exit to it. And of course, Plato wants us to exit the cave. But there's something interesting about what Lacan does. Lacan, in many ways, inverts Western metaphysics, and he inverts Plato by saying it's not just that you have to exit the cave. It's also that you find the analyst interested in listening at the entrance exit of the cave. And you have to, as it were, the analyst is going back into the cave, right? And listening carefully to what subjects see as the illusions on the cave wall. And he even gives us a sense of what type of creature that we find at the entrance exit of the cave. And I think he tells us it's something like an androgynous creature. Like, we find at the entrance exit of the cave, we find a being that is both man and woman, that is both male and female, that is this primordial creature, this creature of the, in Plato's dialogues, you have this idea of the androgynous creature which Zeus was jealous of and needed to be divided into two, and then we spend the rest of our lives searching for our unfindable complement. And here I could maybe, before getting ahead of myself, reference Cynthiana's article where she's talking about this irremediable division and this nature of love, this cruel nature of love, as you can never find your other half. But actually, it's this precious solitude that we're trying to guard when we're in a love relationship. We're not trying to merge into one. We're trying to create a space for each other where we can hold a certain gap with each other and protect each other's solitude. And I love that emphasis. So writing for a first cause, trying to think from the standpoint of subjective lack, and that gives us a window into truth. And that actually retroactively means that, for Lacan anyway, and the philosophical challenge before us here, that the history of Western metaphysics is in some sense not true. It might be rational, but it might not be true. And here I could bring up, for example, O.G. Rose's work, The True is Not the Rational. We should not be too quick to collapse the true and the rational. And just because we have a rational system, that doesn't mean it's a true system. And what does it mean to be rational and true? Right? I think this is a deeply psychoanalytic challenge. What does it mean to be rational and true? Right? And how alienated can we feel in a negative way when someone's giving us a purely rational system, like it's perfectly coherent, it covers all the bases, like it's internally, any question you give the subject, they'll be able to give you an answer. But is it a true system? Right? I think that's what psychoanalysis listens there. And I think psychoanalysis asks of philosophy that it listens there too. And there's some work I'll get to in Edie Hitchcock's paper, which I think brings this together practically in a very, very nice way. So I'll just end this overview of the writing for a first cause as the history of it is, I understand object patia as the object that Lacan is asking us to work for in the écrit. He says, this is an object which the subject will have to work for with elbow grease throughout the reading. And I think that this work is a testament to the people who went through the course, the people who contributed to the anthology as putting in that work. And what is the object patia? I think it's a lacking object. How I understand this is that a sort of naive type of desire is a desire that thinks that a positive object can resolve it. Whatever we could fill in, whatever commodity you like, positive object that you think you really need that, and then there's some deep satisfaction, existential satisfaction from the positive object. Of course, on the deepest level, we could think about this in a love relationship. But the object patia, yes. So, Luca, the anthology, is the physical anthology now available, or is it just the Kindle?
No, it was a joke. I meant that this is a positive object. Right?
Yeah. So, yes, this anthology is on Amazon. Yeah. Yeah. And once you have this anthology, I promise you, there'll be no more lack. You'll read the authors, especially Wukas's article on Drive, and you'll fully be reconciled. Like this will be the true sublimation. This is so we go there. And I just want to say how I understand metaphysically the object patia is it's like a formless form, and meaning it can take any form, meaning all the positive objects that we desire are, as it were, shadows of this formless form of the object patia. And ultimately, for me, the lesson in the écrit and the lesson I take into philosophy is this transition into drive and the nature of the drive. And the nature of the drive as nothing but a perspectival shift on this lacking object. I'll say a few things here about chapter 0, So I wanted to name. I thought it was important that we have a chapter that starts with 0, and that chapter is by. Let me actually. You know what? I'm gonna here just very quickly share the screen. So this is the PDF table of contents. You'll have the note for the Acree, note on the Acree, the editor's note by Daniel Garner, the foreword, introduction, and then chapter 0. And of like all the anthologies, once we actually get to the chapters, you're already on like page 60. You know, so it's a little bit of a slog to get to the first chapter. But Love of Truth by Samuel McCormick. Samuel McCormick is obviously he's a professor, and he runs a great project called Lectures on Lacan, and I'm looking forward to his work later today. And this connects to what I've been saying, love of truth, that Samuel McCormick talks about the transition between the Lacan of the symbolic and the Lacan of the real as the Lacan who's falling in love with truth, and asking of us to fall in love with truth. But the question is, what is truth for Lacan? And McCormick talks about how the truth can only be partially said, that you can never speak the full truth, that to fall in love with truth is to fall in love with incompleteness, to fall in love with limitation, to fall in love with your incapacity. And he invented a term in our conference, and he adds it to the anthology, of impotentiality. And I love this idea that we find our potency in our impotence. And this is where oftentimes when we're just in the mode of desire, we fall into the idea that we can only realize our potential if we explore our full omnipotence. We try to take the position of God through whatever human marker of imitation, whether it's fame or money or wealth or status or whatever. But I love this idea that falling in love with truth is falling in love with our impotentiality. And so that's the opening of the anthology. I won't talk about my articles because I'm going to do that at the 1430 mark. But chapter 2 is by Daniel Garner, Lovecraft, The Sun That Moves Other Stars. And Daniel starts off, it's really a meditation on God. And I think it's a Lacanian meditation on God. He talks about God as dangerous. He not only talks about God as dangerous, but he talks about God as dangerous and known in the context of our unveiling to each other in intimate relationships, marriages, friendships, communities. And that the real challenge, Lacanian challenge, I think, in his article, is the difference between the fertile drive and the desire to return to the womb. So the fertile drive being the drive that can work with both sexuality and intercourse on the level of discourse, meaning that when we are speaking with our friends, when we are speaking in community, there's a libidinal aspect to that. It's not just a abstract disembodied discourse, but there's a libidinal work there. And the desire to return to the womb is an inability, I think, to mediate the fertile drive in language, through our marriages, through our unveiling to each other in intimacy. And he ends by saying that we need to keep our faith and not give up the hard work of the challenge demanded by friendship and community. And I love that message and I love that intersection between the intimacy of relationships and the unveiling of God as dangerous, because I think most people recoil to isolation because of this challenge. I'll say in chapter 3, Edie Hitchcock writes an article titled "The Clinic in the Culture." And Edie is, I think, perfectly bringing together psychoanalysis and philosophy and working at that intersection. She herself is an analyst. And she talks about analysis as trench work and philosophy as clean mountain air. And how do we bring together the trench work, the work of particularity, and the clean mountain air that is the universal abstractions? And I think that she does this not only does she do this, but she also, I think, pushes analysis forward by philosophically thinking about the tension between, on the one hand, Deleuzean philosophy, which neglects language, and contemporary neuropsychoanalysis, which she claims leaves out the unconscious drive. And ultimately, what she wants to bring us to, and I think this is a theme that runs throughout the anthology, is the challenge of speaking the unspeakable, the challenge of speaking the affects that are unsymbolizable, and the challenge of not treating, let's say, what might happen in ego psychology or what might happen in psychotherapy, that you try to contain negative affect instead of going deeper into negative affect. And I think that differentiates real Lacanian work from what we might think of as psychotherapy. Mark Gerard Murphy in chapter 4 writes an article called From Ecrit to Embodiment. And in that article, Murphy himself is at this intersection between the symbolic Lacan and the real Lacan. And I think that's another theme that runs throughout this anthology, is there's a lot of people paying attention to the relationship between the symbolic and the real. He says that the interesting thing about this article is that Murphy's talking about both thought and method in Lacan, meaning that when Lacan is in the symbolic phase, in the Ecrit, he's writing, and he is thinking about the lack in the symbolic. But he argues that towards the later Lacan, he needs to push beyond writing itself. And he talks about how the late Lacan stops speaking as much. He starts representing his ideas in mathemes and topological models. And ultimately, another theme I think that comes out in this anthology, and which Murphy points towards, is the idea of the real as a kind of extended biofield body. And what I take that to be is that he's also taking us outside of the clinical structure, in the sense that the extended biofield body is really asking us to think about the field of the real, and the way in which this field of the real is excessive, it's imminent to our lack, and that ultimately it can't be covered by the symbolic alone. In chapter 5, Thomas Hamelrich writes an article titled Lacan's Crazy Wisdom. And I love that Thomas's article is very unique and original in the sense he's asking us to entertain Lacan's style as a form of crazy wisdom, and to not think about Lacan as a typical academic intellectual. He notes that great 20th century intellectuals like Camille Paglia, Alan Sokal, Richard Dawkins, Noam Chomsky, Roger Scruton, they all disliked Lacan on the basis of his style, on the basis of his writing and his performance, the way he did it. And Hamelrich makes the argument that Lacan's style, his inaccessibility, was purposeful in the sense that it was to make himself impossible to imitate, so that you can't imitate Lacan. There's something irreducible, singular about his style. And he also notes that someone like Slavoj Žižek learned from his master, in the sense that Žižek adopts this crazy wisdom approach, this unrepeatable style, without copying the master. And that's the whole point, that you want to be inspired by someone who's performing in a crazy wisdom way, but you have to get the point that you can't mimic them. And I think what Thomas is also trying to say there is that a lot of Lacanians don't get this. A lot of Lacanians try to copy Lacan. They try to be Lacan. And we should avoid this trap. We shouldn't try to be Lacan. We can be inspired by Lacan. And perhaps if we don't get this, and I think this is maybe the point Thomas is making towards the end of the article, perhaps if we don't get this, we become nothing but a large language model. Like we become like a computer, like just trying to repeat exactly the master. Joris in chapter 6 writes an article titled Full Speech, Empty Speech, and the Riddle of the Loneliest One. And this is a really great article on the distinction between empty speech and full speech. He notes that Lacan's idea of empty speech is a tool of the ego. It's designed to preserve appearances and maintain the status quo. whereas full speech is on the level of the subject of the unconscious, trying to articulate hidden truths, and there's an inherent disruption to full speech. And he notes, for example, empty speech in dinner parties or political meetings or social media posts or corporate gatherings. And the thing that I appreciate the most about Joris's article is that he asks a really interesting question, but also reflects on a key distinction on it. He asks the question, why is it so difficult for humans to speak of the truth? Why is it so hard for us to be truthful? And his answer is not death anxiety. His answer is actually more about the fear of death within the dissolution of our ego. The gap between my ego and myself. And again, getting towards the fact that if we're speaking these truths which are disruptive, we are at once overcoming this illusion of completion and closure, but we're also going into undeniable affects of that she's pointing towards in her article. That's very good. In chapter 7, Cinziana Ravini writes an article titled The Cruelty of Love, and she's working with the well-known Lacan, giving what you don't have to someone who doesn't want it, right? Like this really cruel definition of love. Like when you usually hear people talk about love, there's a lot of fantasies about synergistic merger with the other. And of course, Cinziana, as a good Lacanian analytic thinker, knows this is just the imaginary phallus. She talks about the dialectic of the imaginary phallus as pretending to have it or pretending to be it. If I am a man pretending to have the phallus, or a woman pretending to be the phallus. And she seems to emphasize another theme that runs throughout this anthology, which is the importance of understanding and accepting and loving castration. To love as the non-overlap, what she calls the irremediable division. And what this teaches us, and what this helps us, I think, understand, is to love is also to let the other be alone. And that while also coming together, being with the other is important, we also need to guard our, she calls it, no less precious solitude. And maybe my favorite part of her article was a note that she cites from her own clinical work, where a patient reflects on something his or her mother told them, which is, you were so successful in your life because I refused to help you when you wanted it. And I love this way of thinking, that oftentimes the other that we want to help us, the other that we want to join us in our desire, is our very own self-stunting, that we have to grow out of the demand that the other joins us in our desire. And this is the key to both love and, I would say, also the drive, which can make love a lifelong adventure. In chapter 9, David Pasti writes an article titled Simulating Sexual Difference. And he's talking about sexuality and artificial intelligence. And he's talking about the fact that if we're really, he puts a challenge, basically, that if we are to really simulate human intelligence, machine learning models cannot be based on a reductive model, but a model that considers the real of intersubjectivity. And for David, the best model of intersubjectivity is derived from Lacan, on the idea that the symbolic order is based on a lack in the other. And he thinks that the dimension that artificial intelligence will not be able to simulate is this deadlock of sexual difference. That AI is not embodied, AI is not produced through the straits of sexuality, as Lacan will say in the Écrit. And therefore, AI will never be able to reproduce fully the human, because this dimension of sexual difference is actually where we are perhaps in touch with maybe our inhuman core that makes us human. Something like this. In chapter 10, Łukasz Silski writes an article called Drive Rest, Withdrawal Through Sublimation. And he asks the question, can sublimation provide existential stability to the modern subject? He divides this into two parts. with first a recognition that modern subjectivity faces profound existential anxiety in relationship to the loss of givens, and also that there are contradictions of sublimation that make it hard for us to make sublimation our new ground. He makes the distinction between a form of sublimation that's in relationship to the big other, which he calls empty of the drive, and a form of sublimation which is more ex nihilo, which he calls desire fueled by drive. And here he does end up arguing that sublimation is the response to the lack of givens, that sublimation allows us to give body to the real aspect of our drive, and perhaps in that process overcome a reactionary temptation to our current moment, which is riddles us with existential anxiety. So a big challenge there. In chapter 11, Philip Shin offers us an article titled Lacanian Stewardship, and is a really great article. And he focuses on how Freud, this is a crucial, I think, point, that Freud was uncertain about the relationship between death drive and eros. And he notes that Lacan picks up Freud in this ambiguity and claims that Lacan invents object petit a to deal with this ambiguity in the relationship between death drive and eros. And I like that he articulates the relationship between Freud and Lacan as Lacan is a son who honors his father by going beyond him as a rule follower, a rule breaker, and a rule maker. And I think this triad of whoever inspires us intellectually, can you first be a rule follower? Can you follow the rules of the father? Can you be a rule breaker in a creative way? Can you break the law of the father? And then can you be a rule maker? And in this, he writes at length about new ways of thinking about the object petit a in relationship to death, in relationship to dread, in relationship to dance, in relationship to desire, and ultimately in relationship to our devices, where he seems to think the object petit a is perhaps most problematic today. In chapter 12, Matthew Stanley offers a work called From the Exoteric to the Esoteric, and he starts it off with a personal story about how he had an experience in a Christian organization which was at once intensely familiar, reminding him of his childhood, as well as out of joint, no longer in line with the way he practiced his understanding of Jesus. And in this, he introduces the distinction between an exoteric discourse, which is straightforward and intuitive, perhaps for younger people to learn the rules of the symbolic, and an esoteric discourse, which is usually playing with the gaps between the content of enunciation and the position of the enunciator. And he sees our need for an exoteric discourse as kind of like our need for a transitional object when we are in the maturation of our desire. But that the initiation into an esoteric discourse, like Lacan's Écrit, is an initiation into the lack in the other, but he notes that we need to both understand the lack in the other in esoteric discourse and cultivate the capacity to return to a normative symbolic order, to return to a more straightforward exoteric discourse. And perhaps that is an important lesson for Lacanian analysis today. In chapter 13, Cleo Kearns writes an article titled A Striking Negligence, which is about female sexuality, but specifically motherhood. And she was specifically engaging with an article in the Écrit, a small article titled Guiding Remarks for a Conference on Female Sexuality, where her main aim in the article is to reintroduce to us thought about the ordeal of childbirth. And I think her starting point is an important one, which is that while the ordeal of childbirth is shared by the infant and the mother, she says, of course, infants cannot speak of it, mothers don't speak of it, and fathers do not seem to speak about it. And so we have this kind of triad where nobody speaks about the ordeal of childbirth. And she wants to restore a sense of theoretical rigor in regards to this ordeal. And in order to do that, she claims that we should think about maternity in relationship to the castration complex, in relationship to the lacking phallus, in relationship to the, perhaps we could say, the mother as phallus, and then the baby as a kind of replacement or substitute phallus. Working towards the end, Dimitri in chapter 14 provides an article titled What Doesn't Work? And here, Dimitri's working also with the history of Western metaphysics, and specifically Aristotle's four causes as the ground of Western metaphysics. And he claims that Kant is really the figure in the history of philosophy, which introduces the first semblance of a fifth cause, which introduces the idea of freedom as a first cause. He, however, says that this is only completed in, or brought to its climax, in Lacan's idea of the object petit a. And I think his ultimate lesson for us in this article is that we should be careful when it comes to thinking about the final cause as a beautiful idea, when we are not also and equally thinking about the subjective first cause as a lacking object, as reflected in the title of the article, as something that does not work. In other words, if you're not constantly in relationship to something which is not working, which is lacking, then your idea of the beautiful might become, he ends the article by saying, the most corrupting of comforts, and even the worst corruption, as the corruption of the best. Great article. Finally, as it regards to this summary of this fantastic anthology, chapter 15 is another article written by Philip Shin titled Towards a Comedic Relation, where he asks two questions. Where do adults come from? I love that question. Directly inspired by Alenka Zupancic, What is Sex? And we have some extra visitors. And the second question, how might comedic love relations be more widespread? His answer to the first question, where do adults come from, is in relationship to the singularity of the synthome, the atom of enjoyment, which binds together the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. In other words, adults become in their singularity of enjoyment. And his second question, how might comedic love relations be more widespread? He introduces the idea, also in Alenka Zupancic, What is Sex?, of the comedic sparkling nickname, that we come up with a singular nickname for our intimate other, which is irreducible and uniquely contingent to that relationship. So with that, I'll close the opening, and I know there's only 15 minutes for me before we go to Dimitri, but I want to open up maybe some questions and reflections, and maybe I'll save my own reflections on my own work till the closing of tonight's event. So we have about 15 minutes, and I'll stop sharing here. And before we go to Dimitri, I'll just invite anyone. Does anyone want to jump in? I guess we'll just do this by the raising hand function. And I suppose I'll privilege the authors, but I'll certainly, anyone who raises their hand is free to jump in. Are there any ideas, reflections, anything that wants to be said? And just want to emphasize that, this event is for all of us. Maybe I'll reshare the Sahil, the lovely Sahil. Jump in, sir.
Hi, Cadell. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say that this is an anthology that I really didn't want to miss. And attending this launch has proven that what I lacked or missed is absolutely fire. So it looks really exciting. Really looking forward to reading the works.
you have a little FOMO?
Absolutely, and I knew about it even in advance, but somehow, the fact that you have a book launch is just a way to really, come full circle. So yeah, really
All
exciting
right.
stuff. Really looking forward to reading stuff.
As long as it's a circle of circles, Sahil, not a traditional classical circle. We don't want
Absolutely.
we don't want any of those. No, I'm just joking.
Absolutely. And what a lovely cover. I mean, this cover is just phenomenal. Yeah.
I'm just resharing it here for people who might have joined us late, but this cover is done by Alicia Herbert, a good friend of mine. And you'll see on the front cover, which is writing where you'll see the text writing for a first cause, that this is supposed to be the inside of a Klein bottle. And then you see the object patiat, the entrance exit of the Klein bottle. And then at the other side, on the back cover, you'll see someone coming to the entrance exit of the Klein bottle and seeing the analyst's chair as empty as the lack in the other. That's the meaning behind that. And yeah. Anyone else wanna jump in? Cinziana, you want to jump in? Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Carol, for reuniting us. It feels amazing to be amongst you. And I just had a reflection on the cover. It kind of appears to me to symbolize actually the exit of the grotto of Plato's cave in a way.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Yeah. That's exactly what inspired me.
Because you have
Yeah.
the multitude on the
Yeah.
cover, and then you have the exit of the subject on the back. So it's beautifully thought. So very great honor to be on this journey. Thank you, Carol.
Absolutely was the inspiration, was the idea that we could represent Plato's cave as a Klein bottle, and that the history of Western metaphysics is trying to describe the causality of the cave, the efficient cause of the cave, the formal, the final, and so forth. But that what it misses is this counterintuitive flip where we have to think the relationship of the subject itself to the cave, that it's not enough to exit the cave. Like, we must exit the cave, but we must also return to the cave. And I think the analyst helps us with that. And so the analyst is that brave subject, I think, that not only is teaching us how to leave, but is teaching us how to return, and teaching us that ultimately we can have a perspective shift on fantasy. We can traversing the fantasy does not mean no fantasy. Traversing the fantasy means we have a different relation to our fantasy, which I think in your article is well expressed with how this actually influences love and how we perform and dramatize love. So it's very, very important. We have about 10 minutes more, and then at the top of the hour, we're going to be bringing in Dimitri Kroimans. Yes. Lisanne, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, it's fine. Liza, everything works.
Lisanne.
Well, thank you for doing this. Last time I was joining something that you organized was because of Pete. I'm with Peter Rollins, kind of doing stuff that he has been exploring. So, but I'm very happy that you're doing this because I'm an architectural student, and with Pete, we talk a lot about what space is and what structure is and how big spatiality actually is. And so I really like how psychoanalysis is able to help me form kind of a structure that is also able to produce a plan or a structure that is architecture, and then how that spatiality works, because architecture is an embodied practice, of course. So I'm really happy that this is happening, because in my school we don't talk about this, and I think it's the thing that actually makes it. So happy to be here and excited to see what's coming.
Would you mind expanding a little bit about how you think this conversation feeds back into a field like architecture, like how it might change the way we think about architecture, or how you think about that?
Well, I feel like there's this one American architect, he's not alive anymore, but his name is John Hajduk, and he already did a lot of that work. So I feel like for me, the change already happened, because he was really intrigued by the thing that came before the thing actually came, so the beforeness, the spatiality. And he did a lot of work of that already, but he did most of it in drawing. So he made a lot of structures which embodied that thing, that spatiality, but only a few of them were built. And what I like about it is that the things that were built were actually done in communities. So people that could just sign up, and he had this one condition about the structure that would be produced, is that the spirit would be captured. And I really like how this is, for me, the starting point of an exploration. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, and great to know that there are people from Peter Rollins' orbit that are joining us.
Flying in.
Sorry?
Flying in.
Flying in. Great to have you here.
Thanks.
Should I call on anyone else? Five minutes left before we go to Dimitri. Anything else that anyone wants or I could ask, is there anything, had anyone missed the opening? Anything that I need to go back over in terms of the release? Anything practical that anyone might have missed? I'll say just a sec. Here, if I reshare, I think it's, what am I resharing? Losing track. Share this screen. So say I'll reshare for those of you who might have missed that if you go to the anthologies bar on the Philosophy Portal website, you can see Writing for a First Cause is now there. So you just click on that. This is the homepage for the anthology. And if you want to check out the digital documents for the anthology, you just click on Student and Member Access. And when you click on Student and Member Access, it'll take you to a page which is password protected. And the password is Thinking Portal, all one word. You'll come to this page where you'll see all the publications and all of the authors listed in our anthologies chronologically. So you go to, for example, Łukasz Silski, his article's here. You click the PDF, and you've got the article with the citation and everything. So you can look through all of these articles individually, digitally, online. They're all accessible, as well as, of course, in the anthology itself. And the history of all of our writing is here. I'll say make sure that's available for everyone. And I'll definitely also send out an email when the actual physical copy is available on Amazon, which should be, hopefully, later today. We'll see. Łukasz, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't have anything particular to say, but I love the fact that Philip actually submitted 2 articles. And
yeah.
One maybe heavily influenced by Alenka and the second more by Lacan, because I myself actually entered the anthology through Alenka, like What is Sex Cause? But I actually kind of dropped the ideas, and they were more in the background during the writing process. So that must have been a ton of work for Philip.
Yeah, he did a great job. I think the chapter 15 article is definitely, he's playing with the questions in What is Sex, like where do adults come from? I love, that's one of my favorite parts of What is Sex. And then also at the end of What is Sex, with the comedic relation, the idea of the nickname, which is a great idea. The nickname as a contingent, and he links it through the idea that the nickname is located at the level of a singular synthome. So I really enjoyed that. And then, yeah, indeed, his other article is more inspired by Lacan, and he's thinking about almost the name of the father between Lacan and Freud, and the ethics of how do we relate to the intellectuals who inspired us. So it's a great contribution. And indeed, yeah, Shin produced 2 articles, and yeah, is I think important also to note that this is not just inspired by Lacan's Creed, but also Alenka Zupancic, What is Sex? All right. Any final thoughts? And before we go to Dimitri, anything about the any of the authors want to say anything? Please feel free. All right. Well, then I think 3 minutes early. You okay to jump in, Dimitri?
Yeah.
Do you want to come to my computer?
Yeah, I'll go to your computer.
All right. Dimitri, Joris, and I are actually all around the same table. So we'll just switch it up here, and please, everyone, Dimitri Croimons.
Okay.
Dimitri,
Yes.
what doesn't work?
What doesn't work? Yes. So there's I'll just go to my paper. Okay. Well, let's not do that. So okay, I start my paper with citing Edgar Allan Poe, and Edgar Allan Poe is talking about wretchedness, and he's thanking our merciful God because wretchedness is never diffuse. It's never man of the mass that experiences wretchedness. It's always particular. It's always you yourself that experiences the ultimate wretchedness, loneliness, disgust. And yeah, I do agree. We have to thank our merciful God for that, for singular negativity, and that's really the starting point, right? The starting point is that wretchedness. So yeah, I go through the history of philosophy through from Aristotle to Descartes, Spinoza, Kant, Hegel, and then to Lacan to show indeed, as Cadell said, that the object cause is the fifth cause in a way. It's the fifth cause. But first we have to count to 4 with Aristotle to see even the discrepancy between the third and the fourth cause, and that's what modernity really started in. I argue with Descartes. Descartes saw that there was a discrepancy between efficient causality and final causality, or in other words, Descartes thought philosophy should comport itself with the mechanisms of existence, and that the beauty of God as the final cause of the universe and everything should be set aside because this is not a philosophical matter. Now, Spinoza collapsed the final cause back into efficient causality. For him, what is efficient is beautiful. So there's no need for a final cause, which is anyway just a human anthropomorphization of God. And yeah, really, like if everyone's talking about Alenka's What is Sex, my paper could be seen as thinking through the consequences of her Ethics of the Real, which is really an amazing work that locates, I would say, the Lacanian innovation, his philosophical innovation of the object cause as the first cause. Like that's there, she locates that in the Kantian break. And so the Kantian break is a break where we already go from desire to drive, because in Spinoza's conception of freedom, we are free once we align with what is necessary. There is the vibes of God, so to say, and they are already out there as nature, and it is good and it is perfect, and it is just for us to align with the flow of the universe. Of course, we fail and we are deficient in that, but we can nonetheless strive. And this is the wretchedness of desire. This is the agony of always trying and coming up against, but never achieving that final alignment with God. But Kant turns this around. For Kant, the problem is that we are already aligned with God. In other words, we're already aligned with the inner workings of the universe. And it's even more wretched than we could have ever imagined. it's the ugliness doesn't stop from spiraling downwards, because it turns out that we cannot ever say that an act of us is free. As soon as I say, look, my speech is free, or me picking up a cup of water is free, we can always say, well, there's like objective mechanisms behind that. It is biological, it is determined on the level of physics. So there is an efficient cause that we could actually study there. And so what's left of freedom with Kant? Well, the wretchedness of freedom with Kant is in the break in efficient causality, or really where things do not work. Things do not work. In other words, mechanisms break down. There is glitches, there is bugs, there is errors. And what does that mean for the subject? Well, that means being shocked. That means trauma. That means continual obstacles that do not permit you to align in a neat way with what already is. And now this wretchedness, this frustration, this ugliness, this stain that we can never wipe, that is transcendental freedom. That is transcendental freedom. And God, no, it's not beautiful. It is not beautiful at all. And so here we are, when turning the pages of Kant, we are setting Aristotle aside, in the sense that, Aristotle thought that beauty was the final cause of God, universe, and everything. But with Kant, freedom is the very disruption of beauty. And so that's the truth of wretchedness. That's the truth of wretchedness. And so that's the argument that Alenka Supancic is making in Ethics of the Real. So why Lacan then? Why Lacan? Well, because I think that the history of metaphysics from Aristotle to Leibniz, or Plato to Leibniz, was really obfuscating that first cause, that object cause, object A. But at the same time, there was a development. And the Cartesian break really shows that the fact that efficient causality and final causality don't just align, like they're not the same causality. What is that? What is that gap between them? That's really the break that Descartes worked with, and Leibniz, as the final metaphysician, was the last attempt to suture that wretchedness, to overcome this gap. And so how do we overcome wretchedness? Well, with vibes, with harmony, with the beauty of God, right? So this is, wherever we find a wretchedness, we should remind ourselves, for Leibniz, that it is actually the beauty of God that is underneath this, and the fundamental harmony that God sets the universe into, right? So God doesn't throw a dice for Leibniz, but God chooses what is the most beautiful dice there is, and I'll throw this one. So no, this with Kant, the truth is not in that. The truth is, however, for Kant, in a choice, which is curious, because for Leibniz, it is the choice of the best, namely the choice of God to create the best world that he can, and that he wants for us. But for Kant, this choice is really more of wretched nature. And here I want to have a concrete example, and one that Lacan gives in terms of introspection. And so we all have these experiences that we are addicted to something, and we are questioning ourselves, like, why do I keep grabbing the bottle? Why do I keep entering this relationship that I know is bad? Why do I keep talking to this person? Why do I keep doing that thing that I don't want to do, and yet I keep doing it? Why do I do this? Is it because I grew up in this way? Is it some trauma that I have to uncover? But no, these can all function as pathological coping mechanisms, because the object cause, the fundamental cause, comes from nowhere. And so to be preoccupied of why do I not listen to myself? Why can't I master the universe? Why can't I master my relationships? Well, I think the Lacanian wager is that to stop being bothered with the fact that there is no ultimate cause to your wretchedness, that is what can set you off to work for a cause, outside of you, to to be able to really have cruel love for others. And Ravini, when I read Cadel's summary of your work in the forward yesterday, I was shocked, of course, and I immediately loved it. I thought it was so powerful. Think about this for a long time, because this is to me also the Lacanian way, cruel love, right? Which is not about self-love. It's not about self-love, right? It's not about self-love. It's a love, as Zupancic has taught me, it's a love as drive. And so in Kant, we get the beginnings of a critique of pure desire, which always comes from a certain enunciated position, right? Desire is never impersonal. It's never God's desire for the good that is the end of the beautiful. No, this certain subject has a certain frustration from which he desires. And that's also the place where the drive could come from and will come from if we... Cadel's just trolling in the chat, guys. That's not me. That's fucking hell. Okay, so anyway, I'm caught off guard now. This yeah, so that these are the things. Yeah, that there's something that doesn't work, and that's way more important than beauty. It's way more important than the good, because it's that wretchedness and that thing that we want to obfuscate, that we want to overlook, that we constantly succeed in overlooking by pathologies and addictions, because we're all hysterics at the bottom of it. That is what we could look at, and I'm trying. I hope I am doing. It was an effort in performing cruel love. Yeah, that's. I don't know. Maybe my article can yeah, add something to the conversation in that sense. So yeah, the object PTA looking from the angle of the history of philosophy, especially Aristotle, modernity, and then Kant and Lacan, and yeah, I don't feel to mention Hegel, of course, too. But yeah, that's it. I talked for 10 minutes now, so if anyone wants to
yeah, please just encourage people to raise their hands.
Yeah, please raise your hands.
And maybe I'll ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
And just want to encourage everyone to get involved if you have a question as well for Dimitri. I mean, a few questions really are coming to my mind, but maybe move over a bit, so I can. The history of metaphysics and metaphysics, the true, the good, and the beautiful, like the true, and in that order, the true, the good, and the beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Are we kind of then thinking that at the ground of the true, there's a lack?
Yeah.
At the ground of the true, there's a lack. There's something disturbing.
The ground
the first cause of the subject.
The ground of the true is how falsehood is disturbing. The disturbance of falsehood, like fuck, I was wrong. Now everything changes. That's truth. That's truth. Like that's like the truth is like not being able to look away from the falsehood. I think that's the really location for the truth. So yeah, when it comes to the good, it's like, well, what's the good? Well, of course, if you really want to tell someone very quickly what you think about the good, just tell them that they're Nazis or something. Like, like we ground the good in evil. And so there's no way for us to universalize good without this juxtaposition. So there's also no way for us to tell a priori what the good is, I would say.
I think it's very powerful to think about the unity of good and evil, that we can't actually think about the good without evil, and like politically speaking, this is how it manifests. And the example of the Nazis, perhaps the best of all, but historically, like, I mean, I'm now following more and more people talking about how the breakdown of the World War II consensus. That what I mean by the breakdown of the World War II consensus is that since World War II, there's been a consensus that Hitler is the ultimate evil. And so we can always define what's good in relationship to that we're not Hitler.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly.
And then in the history of metaphysics, you could say Jesus is defined in relationship to Satan, or God is defined in relationship to Satan. That we can know God through its negation as something that's satanic.
Yeah.
And I feel like why this conversation's important politically, socially, is I feel like we're redefining now, like, our orientation about what's good and what's evil.
Yeah.
In in people sort of breaking open conversations where they're framing Hitler as maybe redeemable figure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think a good example of the beautiful comes to mind here, and that is Hitler's marriage. So Hitler was dating Eva Braun throughout his years, but it was never known that he had a wife. It was always hidden, because lots of women in Germany were supporting Hitler, and him having a wife would be a scandal. They had to keep up the appearances. But in their final days in the bunkers in Berlin, while the Russians were coming, on the day that Hitler and Eva Braun killed themselves, they also married. And isn't that beautiful? Like, really, like, in this suicidal act, they just want to have a last theatrical celebration. Right. And there's it's a very widely known fact that at the end of wars, you get like lots of orgies, people drinking together, dancing on tables while the bombs are being dropped.
Right.
And that's really the coincidence of the beautiful and evil, and really this like nauseating sickness and wretchedness of us. So yeah, I think we should see, like, that's, Hitler he made a lot of people very happy, and that's like the notion of happiness is important here too. Like, Hitler's parents, they were happy when he was born, and then all of Germany became happy when he finally became the Führer, and then all of Austria also became happy when they had the Anschluss, and then the whole of Europe became happy when he was defeated, and also the whole world. So that's sickening, that's sickening. And I think,
and it kind of unified Europe in a way.
It did,
like, against him.
Yeah, it did unify Europe, and I don't think there would be a creation of Israel without the Holocaust.
No, it wouldn't.
Yeah. So but so this is the political side of things, and I think Lacan really hones in on this in a very weird way, and that is the weirdness of the objectivity for me, because then the ultimate political question in the West probably still is, where did Hitler come from? Like, how could that happen, right? For a liberal or a leftist, at least, like, where did that come from? And Lacan gives the ultimate answer here. Hitler literally came from nothing, because he was nothing. And then you can just look at the way he comports himself, his voice, his hands, his eyes. That's where it all happens, right? Like, Hitler, he was so powerful that he didn't even have to order people. He would just say what he wanted in a subtle way, and people would just carry out his will. And so there was this ultimate linkage of very tragically the German people and Hitler. So
I'm thinking about
I just want to say one thing.
No, go for you take it.
When Hitler orders or says, the German people, they did it, but then at the end of the war, it's like, we didn't know that, and like, it wasn't me doing it. People felt like that, and in Austria, people really succeeded to not have this guilt that Germans still feel today of, like, we actually did that. And there's a truth to saying we didn't do that, because there's no subjective agency there. Like, these people liberated their subjective wretchedness in the goodness and the beautiful of Hitler. That was the project.
Yeah.
Like, we are finally free. Hitler tells us what to do, and we just have to get rid of the the ultimate disease, which turns out to be the Jews. And
So I'm thinking about Samuel McCormick's article emphasizing the truth and subjective lack of impotentialities.
Yeah.
That are in our impotence, we find our power.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like there's an ethics that we need to think about there, because you were saying Hitler came from nothing.
Yeah.
He came from being impotent.
Yeah.
But you can use your impotence to create the illusion of beautiful power.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we get obscene masters.
Yeah.
Obscene masters, I'm gonna say, come from this the ethics, the unethical determination of impotentiality.
Impotentiality. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a good word. That's really a nice twist on the origin of us as subjects and how we handle things. And yeah, indeed, Hitler was a very meager and weak man. Very terrified of himself, and of course, like, he didn't know himself what that was. People around him didn't know what that was. And that's also why you got all these theories about Hitler, right? Maybe it was his childhood, or maybe it was something that happened to him when he was in the army in World War I, why he hates Jews, or whatever. There's all these theories. There are these positive theories of this and that. But Lacan adds one more thing, and that is nothing. Namely, that Hitler comes from nothing. So there's no positive feature, and we could say, okay, now it's resolved, that's where it comes from. And that nothingness is indeed powerful by virtue of its obfuscation, right? Which is object A. Object A is the void and its obfuscation, the formlessness and its how it takes form, right? Like, so object A, it's a lacking object, it's not in reality. So what's reality? Well, reality are imaginary symbolic coordinates, right? It's not whatever's not the real, that's reality. Whenever we can a sense of like, okay, this feels real, I feel kind like stable and comfortable, that's reality. But then the object A, it gives us these evanescent semblances where the real seems to curve in, right? And that's why I'm saying the hands, the blue eyes, like the way Hitler, his voice, the way he moved. It's not that Hitler was a beautiful, powerful man, right? And that's why Nietzsche was wrong. It's not will to power that's the fundamental metaphysical substrate of reality. And that's what Lacan did get right, as opposed to also metaphysics prior to him. It's the object A. It's that impotentiality, and at the same time, the way it obfuscates itself, and therefore it looks potent, right? It looks potent, and so yeah, the political consequences of thinking like this are huge, and at the same time, it's also extremely personal, because there is no, you can't even ground yourself in lack. Like, lack always obfuscates itself in partial objects, which are frustrating and disruptive, and it's like people chewing in a certain way can be annoying to you. Like, that's object A, right? It's not a thing that's in reality. It's like this disturbance of your comfortable, stable reality.
When we're thinking about multicultural pluralism, I remember, like, this is just a story to show your point about these little things like how we chew our food or something that annoys us. Like, with multicultural pluralism, I had a friend who said he was moving out for a month, and we had to bring in someone to take the rent over for a month, and he said, just no Indians because I can't stand the smell of their food. Like the smell of food, or or the way we listen to music, or like, these little things that tick us off.
And I can remember, recently I was at a public space, and there was a person, and he suddenly became very angry and said, "Why are you looking at me like this?" And this other person was shocked, like they weren't even looking at this other person, but just this sense of the gaze and the voice, they're so traumatic. And at the same time, this is why the cover of the book is so great, because object A as the object class as what doesn't work, as a particular wretchedness, for example, we need that. That's the way to the lack in the other. That is the way to the lack in the other. So there's never an immediate access of, okay, now I realized that there's a lack in the other. But no, you need to be beguiled and fascinated. You need to be duped, as Lacan would of course say, to be able, you need to, the obfuscation, to see how impotentiality is underneath that. And yeah, that's a singular thing for each person themselves to work through. So there's no, I feel like when I read the foreword in the anthology, that there was no sense of an imaginary unity in the anthology.
No,
it's not like we all agree on a fundamental.
There's no
stable
imaginary phalli here.
I don't think so.
We're all real phalli.
Yeah.
We're really here, guys.
Yeah. So that's I like that about this type of discourse that we are cultivating, because we need others to do such a thing, right? Like introspection is not enough, even like reading is not enough, but it's also in like being, I like to put it in the following like way, to be voiced, because it's the other that voices us, right? Like the object A is the object cause of desire, and desire is totally like otherized. It comes from the other, it is of the other, it is for the other. But by being voiced by the other, which could be, you know, Lacan as a psychoanalyst who has written a certain corpus, like by moving through the canon, we can dialecticize substance. And so we can throw up a spell to dispel it and see that substance is subject. And that's a Hegelian operation that is like a kind of latent psychoanalytic operation. And so, yeah, I do really think that Hegel was right. Like history develops towards freedom in a retroactive way, and that the object A is the culmination of such a concept of freedom that is historical.
So the question I want to, and one again, we got about 7 minutes left. If anyone has a question for Dimitri, please feel free to jump in. But the question I have for you is about the telos of history as freedom.
Oh yeah.
And the pre-modern understanding of the history of metaphysics, as under beauty, you said that freedom is a disruption of beauty.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, how do you interpret beauty and the history of metaphysics from the standpoint as freedom as a disruption of beauty?
Yeah, that's
no pressure.
Yeah, you got like 6 minutes. Well, I do think that there is, okay, so I'll put it like this: mechanism isn't enough. It's not enough to explain the way things work.
Yeah,
that's not enough to us.
Yeah,
it's like rationality, or there's a reason for everything. That is not enough for us. Or as Leibniz himself will say, because yeah, it's in reading these early modern guys that it comes to the fore, the problems. But he will say at some point it has to stop. It has to stop. And where does it stop? Well, in God and the goodness of God. So Leibniz is honest enough to say, well,
they don't want that per si muove. They don't want that, and yet it goes on and on and on and on.
No, they don't. They
want to be monks in the cave.
Yeah, there is such a thing as like drive is perverted, right? I want to have that also out in the open. Drive is perverted, so you can go on in a perverted way. It's like a good example of this is masturbation, right? That's a perverted drive. It's a perverted drive. It's not for reproduction, as Freud would categorize perversion. It's a sexual act not in the name of reproduction. And so, yeah, like there is something emancipatory in the drive, but it has to move through the wretchedness of bringing down pure desire, I think. Bringing down pure desire. So yeah, to answer your question about beauty in the history of...
Critique of pure desire. I love that. Critique of pure reason, critique of pure desire.
Yeah. So it's not
Kant and Lacan.
Yeah, so it's not asking, okay, what's the ultimate cause of why am I so wretched? But it's seeing like, oh wait, that is nothing. Like the nothingness itself, that is the cause. Like I can stop and now work for a cause, which I would take to be, again, that type of psychoanalytic move. Like you don't like to be just disturbed and comported with yourself all the time. There is a pathology in this itself, and that's why Lacan goes against introspection in the Écrit. So there's an importance to that, and I think that's also the difference between something like a imaginary silence and real silence. And so imaginary silence is is a peaceful feeling of tuning into the silenceness of nature, like the romantics loved, right? Like you're in a big forest, a big mountain, and everything is still and quiet and no disruptions. Like finally, as a monk, like retracted. But
like Nietzsche goes up to the mountains at the beginning of Das Buch Zarathustra for the silence and withdrawal, and then he comes back.
And then he comes back, and people are flabbergasted and they're shocked and disturbed, and he brings them to silence, like they don't know what to say. And that's real silence. It's like that point of it's impossible to speak, yet you are to speak, or you're fumbling, you're struggling.
Which I experienced the worst in an actual intimate partner relationship, a marriage. When in the marriage, in the marriage itself, you're brought to this.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's hard to deal with because every couple's brought to this, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think you can escape some moment like this.
Yeah. And so I would say this is the nothingness of, like, this is the first cause. Like, this is the nothingness, how do you say, the impotentiality, right?
Yes.
That's the core.
The ethics of that.
So you encounter the other, you cease to be able to speak or to be voiced or to vibe. And it's in that breakdown that really the truth of the relation, the non-relation, namely, is revealed. So
I'll just say, I had my third girlfriend.
Yeah.
Her parents had this, when I first met them, they had the perfect image. Like I thought they were perfect. Like they looked perfect.
Yeah.
Everything looked perfect.
Yeah.
But then I was with her for about 2 years, and I came to find out that there were like these 3-month periods where the husband would just go silent. And no one knew why.
See, that's real silence.
No one knew why. Like the parent, like it would just be an awkward dinner, and like then he would like, usually he'd be very talkative and like friendly, everything's good. But like during these periods, there was just awkward silence, and then he would go to his basement.
Yeah. So it's the opposite of Wittgenstein. You know, Wittgenstein said about that which we cannot speak, we should be silent. But it's like we should speak about that which we cannot speak. Like real silence, which doesn't work. That's impotentiality. So that's I'll stop it here because
we've got 1 minute. But Łukasz, you want to jump in quick?
I've got 1 minute. I can give a reflection, maybe not a question. Yeah, but the title and your work, Dimitri, it brings me to a thought about like what doesn't work. And I have in my imagination the figure of an uncle, and who goes like, well, of course everything doesn't work. Like everything, they are thieves. They want everything's rotten. And to me, the real magic, maybe the ultimate like mystery of maybe your paper on psychoanalysis also, is how to become this uncle, but without this immediate disavowal. Like, because the uncle says like everything doesn't work, of course it's shit, but he doesn't shoot himself in the head, so obviously he disavows it. And what is this little like lever of subjective stance which allows you to actually go through this and like affirm it? Like I still
good. I think it's
right.
Yeah, it's perfect. I think what you said is perfect. You can indeed say, yeah, of course everything doesn't work. That's obvious, stupid. Like, but it's like
That's the way to immediately like throw off the truth of psychoanalysis. It's just to hear it and go, yeah, of course. What is the point?
Yeah, but like that's the thing, right? Like the fact that things don't work, like not even that works in a clean, like it doesn't even not work in a clean way. Like you can never pre-establish that logic of how things don't work. And that's why we also, I would say, keep falling in in like, no, it works. Like this time it will work, this time it will work. So yeah, whatever that is. But I think like that's also transcendental freedom for Kant is everything works in a way that like causality occurs. And the position from which we make a choice of freedom is has a ground, but the ground of this is nothingness. Kant calls it Gesinnung. That's what Supanchi goes into. But you see, so it's really about not only impersonally things don't work, but things don't work for me in a very particular way, namely in a wretched way. So with that, I'll close it.
Yeah. Writing for a First Cause, Philosophy Portal's 4th anthology, is now available. To pick up a copy, visit philosophyportal.online.